Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this regular Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, June 17th. I'm Councillor Terry O'Keefe in the chair tonight, and joining me is colleagues Councillor Duck, Councillor Duncan, Garnett, and to my left, Councillor Novak, Mayor McNeil Smith, and Councillor Chad Rintoul, and to members of our staff here as well. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Wasanich people who have lived on these lands for millennia, and I'm grateful for their good stewardship of these lands and waters that allow us all to live, work, and play here today. We'll turn our attention to the agenda. There's one amendment that I'd like to make with Council's approval. The presentation for Sidney Transit Hub, they've requested 20 minutes. So if, okay, moved by Councillor Duck.
Second.
Okay, thank you. And all in favor then? Thank you. And any other changes or amendments to the agenda? Okay, a motion then to approve the agenda. Councillor Duck and Councillor Novak. Thank you. Next, approval of minutes from our regular Committee of the Whole meeting for June 3rd, 2024. Recommendation to approve those?
So move.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry, disregard that. Let's move to public participation. So public participation is tonight as a Committee of the Whole is for anything that's on the agenda tonight, only tonight's agenda items. So if there's anyone who would like to come forward for public participation on any of the agenda items, you could do so now. And calling for a second time, anyone for public participation? And third time, seeing no one coming forward, we will close that section. Now we will move to approval of the minutes. Thank you, Councillor Garnett. And Councillor Duck moves, and Councillor Duncan seconds. All in favor? Thank you. Now we'll move to presentations. We have two presentations. The first is from Peninsula Stream Society, and would like to welcome Kyle Armstrong. Good evening. Thank you for being here. And you have 10 minutes for your presentation and perhaps questions from council afterwards. Do I have to do something? No.
Turn it off.
Will it turn red? Oh, there we go. Okay. Yes, thanks. Thank you for having me this evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here this evening on request or suggestion from Randy, the CAO. We sent out invitations to our staff presentations, and Randy suggested that perhaps we should come as a recipient of GIA to present to Council on some of the activities and updates on what we've been up to. So without further ado, just an update. Our team is growing, so we have 8 staff, including 1 part-time staff. All really wonderful people with a great background and expertise in what they do. And again, we're an organization with 20 years history on the peninsula, focusing on ecological stewardship, environmental education, and ecological restoration as our 3 pillars. And we try to integrate these 3 things throughout our programming. First of all, stream restoration as part of that ecological restoration pillar. We have a lot of things happening this summer, many different watersheds. Of particular interest to this council and meeting probably the Culset watershed, which flows through Sidney. That's Ray Creek. As part of our ongoing activities, we completed an assessment of this watershed with our biologist and basically looked for different areas for restoration and improvements within the watershed. This was presented to a number of stakeholders, including Sidney Engineering, First Nations, North Saanich Engineering, and some others, where we went over the assessment and the different areas where improvements could be made, as well as began planning. This summer we're kind of we've gotten approval to come back into the stream after large kind of contamination events that have happened historically. So it's been deemed safe to go back in and do kind of stewardship activities. So we've identified some of these areas and are working to get permits and approvals to do some of this work. In terms of shoreline restoration, we've been very active and very busy across the peninsula. Again, some of the ones of interest to this council meeting, the Mermaid Creek Estuary Project. Of course, I have an update there for you folks, as Jocelyn also updated at one of the past meetings as well. And Resthaven Beach as a potential future opportunity. So for those of you who don't know, Roberts Bay was a Sydney-supported project. Unfortunately, we could not get this project through provincial permitting. The issue is that Mermaid Creek, the estuary at the mouth of the Mermaid Canal, which flows into Roberts Bay, is rapidly eroding and near disappearing. It's a red-listed ecological marsh system. And so we worked with, and here's a photo of that kind of historically. There's that salt marsh complex that exists and is now disappearing and gone. We worked with some really prestigious professionals to come up with a concept and engineering design to kind of mitigate this loss and try to do some restoration, which included installing these hard armoring kind of rock sill features and back nourishing and planting. Unfortunately, we were able to get most of all the permits, but to get Crown license for the project, it needs to go through provincial permitting. The province, some neighbors were not for this project with concerns for the structures on the shoreline as well as the traffic sediment coming through the beach, and essentially quoted their riparian rights to access navigable waters, and that these structures would basically create a barrier to that right. And so the province came back with the obligation to secure the unrestricted rights from those property owners, the unrestricted permissions, support for the project from those property owners with riparian property rights. And a number of those property owners were the ones who made those requests. So unfortunately, we were unable within the duration and restrictions and timelines of the funding to kind of work with the province and work with these property owners to try to get past that barrier. And so we had to basically give the funding back to the federal government and our partners, and we have just since canceled the project. Moving forward in Roberts Bay, continuing with monitoring, shoreline monitoring for forage fish, which I'll get into, as well as some other parameters, continuing with some of the upper marsh restoration work, including removing invasive species and planting native plants, and looking for other treatments. Another potential opportunity for shoreline restoration that's been identified, and we have spoken to staff on this in the past, is at Resthaven Park Beach. So we'd like to work with staff to continue discussions on this. The top two photos show Resthaven Park Beach in its current state. There's a lot of opportunity to take a green shores approach to restoring this shoreline. You have failed riprap and just sort of underutilization of what could be a really nice public amenity as a restored shoreline, as well as carry ecological benefit. Down below is a sort of an analog project that was done in Washington. You can kind of see the treatment that was taken there, resloping the back shore, providing nourishment, things like that. So we'd like to continue conversations with Sidney towards maybe working towards this restoration project in the future. It's a parkland, less issues in terms of fronting private property owners. Our forage fish program is continuing to roll out with many different beaches within the Sidney area. We had a forage fish egg identification workshop with many different stakeholders across the region, which was a really great success, and building the capacity within the network to identify more about the life cycles of these different species, as well as identify these habitats. On the left shows a map within the region of all the beaches that we've identified as habitat, and these have been uploaded into the marine catalog of the Strait of Georgia, available to any kind of municipal planners and things like that to incorporate into their planning processes. The right photo, that's just a little bit more zoomed in on the Sidney area. You can see from Resthaven Island all the way down. There's a number of different beaches that have been identified. The purple shows basically shorelines that have both Pacific sandlands and surf smelt and the red are just surf smell. So this continues to be an area, if you look at the regional map, that's a bit of a hotspot. Sydney's within a hotspot for these species, and it's a rarity. Looking at our partners that are doing this sampling across the region, no one's coming up detecting surf smell tags. So we've detected that we have kind of a regional gem for this habitat, which is, again, important that we do restoration and protection for these areas. Our shoreline monitoring, we continue to do the green crab, eDNA, the forage fish egg sampling. We'd like to start including other parameters as well to kind of advise our restoration and conservation efforts, including large wood debris, substrate, size, invertebrates, rack, as well as mapping seawalls with our other partners. To do this, we've kind of borrowed methodologies from Washington. They have all the parameters for the different, methods for all the different parameters available. So we'd like to begin to adopt this and work with the community to monitor some of these other pieces along the shoreline to give us a better understanding of the health. We also have our Rain Gardens for Headwaters program. This is building green stormwater infrastructure with communities. We have a large project happening in the Sealy Creek watershed. Nothing currently happening within Sydney, but other than the education side of it, and working with schools and classrooms. But we'd like to, and private residences as well, but we'd like to roll something out as a demonstration project. So again, maybe working with staff to identify some areas where we could build a community rain garden. In terms of environmental education, as I mentioned, we had the rain gardens component. We have a full-time environmental education coordinator now, and are modularizing many different pieces of our environmental program, including stream to sea, raising salmon in the classroom and releasing them, creatures of habitat, removing invasive species, kind of an older program that we've run, watershed education, tying those two together, invertebrates, looking in the streams for health, taking kids, identifying bugs in the creek, the yellowfish program, painting trains. We've done that in Mermaid Creek in the past with the local scouts, but with kids in the classroom around spill areas. The rain garden program, as I mentioned, allowing more high school kids to design their own rain garden and hopefully build it. And the beach program, so taking them down to the beach and looking at some of those parameters I previously mentioned. So just some photos of this, stream release, the creatures of habitat, fish release in Wright Creek, the watershed table and the beach program, and the yellowfish drain marking 30 seconds ahead of time. So we've had lots of going on, lots to look forward to in the Sydney area. Thank you so much for your support, really appreciate it, and I'm happy to talk and answer any questions more on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I'll turn to colleagues to see if there's questions. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. So with the thing with the navigable waters, is that something that only people who have waterfront property have that right?
I'm not an expert on the rights. It was interesting to see which properties did and did not. At first we thought we would have to get permission from property owners who complained about the project, but there were some supporters within those riparian property rights that were outlined by the province. So as long, I believe some of them have been severed historically in the past, whether they put fill across the natural boundary, then that may have severed the riparian rights or other instances. Seawalls, no, that doesn't sever riparian rights. So yeah, I'm not an expert. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
Well, I'm just curious because I mean it's a public beach, and it seems strange. It just seems strange to me that the only people who have rights to the ability to access navigable water are people who have beachfront property, rather than say the public of Sydney or whoever it's being maintained for. I mean, obviously in this case. I don't know, that the town of Sydney was in support. So, you know, you would think like on behalf of the town, and we would want to then look after maintaining navigable water in the context of a project that we were doing on our foreshore. But so, because it seems strange that this is like a right that, you know, Indigenous groups have as a traditional right a lot of the time to access traditional things, that it seems that a small group of private property owners can determine the actual, like, what should be a public right to a public resource for everyone. And this seems like it could cause a lot of problems with stream restoration and marine restoration generally. And just in terms of improving recreational habitat, particularly here where there's a lot of structures that are very old and associated with existing private properties that would never be built today but are grandfathered in, that probably do impede the general public's use of navigable waters. Like there's lots of kayakers that use the Ardwell launch. And so I'm wondering if there's still kind of conversations with the province about what that means versus like in terms of public property versus a small number of private property rights, and how that's going and how that might affect your other projects.
It's kind of outside of our realm. We forwarded it on to West Coast Environmental Law, and they've taken it on as a case study. And we've further kind of made the case to the BC Coastal Strategy and raised it in the flag as they draft this new provincial legislation. It certainly doesn't seem right as a permitting process to go through the Crown licensing process for restoration, as it's mostly designed around resource extraction and things like that. So it is kind of an interesting piece, and it's one that needs reform, but it's slow to move, lots of input required. This was going to be, I think, regionally and federally a very significant project in terms of learning and leadership, and one that a lot of other areas would be looking to as a case study. And now it's more of a regionally and federally significant case study in policy. And so we're supporting that as much. DHI is presenting on it right now in Halifax, I believe, at a nature-based solutions conference. We'll be presenting on it at the one in Vancouver shortly in September, and a number of other conferences as well. So it's being carried forward and being studied and looked at, and there's lots of conversations around that, because I agree, it was very well said. Councillor Duncan, it's confusing.
Okay, yeah, thanks. That's interesting. Thanks.
Councillor Duck?
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong, for your presentation. I appreciate the update and enjoyed the information provided in the AGM as well. How does this loss of this project impact the recovery and the rehabilitation of Mermaid Creek itself?
To be determined. I mean, we'll continue to monitor it. We have some really great elevational data now, and we're gaining more and more of an understanding of the dynamics of the bay, and so we'll continue to do so. It's kind of a wait and see. Based on historical trends, it's not good. The marsh is likely to disappear. Yeah.
So further to that, how long is wait and see? You think what's our timeline here before we start to see real further damage? I guess not just real damage. We already got that.
Yeah. I mean, it's disappearing at a rate, at estimate of 50% per year. I mean, that's dynamic. You may get years where it builds back out a bit again, but it seems like we're losing it at about 50% per year. So, yeah, and then with these increasing storm surges, things like that, yeah. Not a coastal engineer, and I don't want to say anything concrete because it's a dynamic system, but overall the trend's very negative. In terms of the property owners and things in there, I can't say. I don't know.
So adding on to that, climate change and sea level rise, we're in trouble.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else, colleagues? All right, that's great. Thanks very much, Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you.
All right, moving next to presentation by Simon Button and Chelsea Mossy and James Wadworth from BC Transit. Welcome you to make your presentation, and you do have 20 minutes and questions afterwards if you're able to.
All right, good evening. Thank you so much for having us this evening. My name is Chelsea Mossy. I'm the Senior Manager of Government Relations with BC Transit. I'm joined this evening by my colleague Simon Button, our Transit Infrastructure Engineer, who you'll hear from later on. And I'm also joined by James Wadsworth, Project Development Manager, and he will just be there to support if there's any questions that are best answered by him and his subject matter expertise. So tonight we are here to provide you with a brief overview of BC Transit, who we are, what we do, as well as a brief overview of the Victoria Regional Transit System and some current initiatives that we currently have underway in the transit system. Once that's done, I'll hand it over to Simon, who will discuss a possible future Sidney Transit Hub project, and we, along with staff, will be seeking your approval in principle to move forward with this project, which would ultimately be in support of a future Peninsula rapid bus service. So this slide here gives a visual depiction of the transit system governance in the Victoria Regional Transit System. As you can see on the one side of things, the provincial government's ultimately responsible for setting public policy objectives. And in this transit system, the provincial government contributes 31.7% of the funding for conventional fixed route transit. The Victoria Regional Transit Commission's share of costs is the remaining 68.3%. And the Victoria Regional Transit Commission is responsible for setting local transit priorities and routes. They're responsible for setting service levels, approving budgets, setting local fares, and providing the local tax subsidy. BC Transit's then responsible for turning the priorities of the Victoria Regional Transit Commission into transit operating and capital plans, for managing the capital program for capital projects, for working with the province to secure their share of funding, and we directly operate the Victoria Conventional Transit Service. The Victoria Regional Transit System provides conventional fixed route transit service as well as custom transit service, which is better known as HandyDART. Our conventional fixed route transit system provides service on 57 routes in the capital region, and we saw about 30.3 million boardings this past 23-24 fiscal year. A range of vehicles provide service on the conventional fixed route system, from small light duty vehicles to the large high capacity double deckers that I'm sure you're all familiar with. As I mentioned, we also provide custom transit or HandyDART service, which is door-to-door demand responsive transit service for people that have a disability that prevent them from using conventional fixed route service. This service is provided by a private operating company, and HandyDART service is also supported by taxi programs for when either dedicated HandyDART vehicles are not available, or also for added flexibility for registered users. Now on to a couple of the initiatives that we have underway at BC Transit. So NextRide is our automated vehicle location technology, which allows our riders to see the location of their bus in real time, as well as its predicted arrival time at their stop. On the back end, this technology provides us with data that we use to enhance schedule reliability and manage on-road incidents, and it also allows us to communicate effectively with our riders. The NextRide platform recently received a refresh, and this updated version of NextRide is helping to provide increased certainty for our riders, and it's also come with new digital passenger information displays on board all full-size buses, which you can see on the slide there. Next, BC Transit's very excited to have rolled out UMO, our new electronic fare collection system technology, in the Victoria Regional Transit System in the summer of 2023, this past summer. So this new system replaced end-of-life technology, and it also reduces barriers to fare payments and transit access, making it easier and quicker for our riders to hop on board the bus. Payment options now include the UMO mobility app, as well as a reloadable UMO fare card, and at a later stage, payment via credit card and debit card will also be enabled. Cash will continue to be accepted for those riders who prefer to use it, but it's expected that most riders will find one of the new payment methods to be a more convenient option. We continue to see growing adoption rates and positive feedback from riders who are pleased with the benefits that UMO is currently bringing them. With regards to electrification, our work towards our 2040 electrification goals continue, and in 2023 we released procurements to pre-qualify vendors to support our heavy-duty electric bus deployments, charging equipment, and major electrical equipment for the first phase of our electrification program. We're pleased to announce that 66 electric buses are on order from 2 pre-qualified vendors, Nova and New Flyer, and we anticipate that the 66 buses will arrive incrementally starting in early 2025 and completing in mid-2026. Funding totaling $395.5 million for buses and charging infrastructure was announced in July 2023. So as you may have seen, our electric demonstration bus was on the road for the past approximately 16 months, and this allowed us to accumulate 11,000 kilometers worth of experience with having a battery electric bus in service on the road. In addition, this has also allowed us to now have battery electric bus charging equipment installed at the Victoria Transit Centre, which is all ready to support electric buses when they arrive. And I will now hand it over to Simon to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Chelsea. As mentioned, my name is Simon, and I work with communities to plan transit infrastructure. When we work with communities, we go through a number of steps. So for this Sidney Transit Hub in particular, this idea was originally identified through our rapid bus strategy as well as in the Peninsula local area transit plan. And then we began working with the town staff last year to try to identify some different options and eventually come to a preferred option, which is why we're here today. So we're here today to seek your approval in principle of continuing to move forward with this preferred option. That official request will come at the next agenda item from staff. We'll touch again on the next steps towards the end of the presentation, but in general, if we gain your support today, we would proceed with getting to support from the Victoria Regional Transit Commission, and then proceed with further design development, public engagement, business case development, and things like that before eventually getting towards construction. So the Victoria Regional Rapid Bus implementation strategy was endorsed by the Transit Commission almost 3 years ago, and it identifies a goal of creating this rapid bus network, which outperforms the personal automobile, which is a pretty bold desire. You can think of rapid bus as the spine of the transit network, so the key regional routes that people get used to use throughout the region. It consists both of improved service, some more frequent buses, as well as dedicated infrastructure, so things like queue jump lanes and improves transferring and between different routes. Looking at the Peninsula Rapid Bus line in particular, we see this, the improvements developing over time, both on that transit service and the infrastructure. So we're working with BC Ferries up at the north end to look at transit improvements there. We're here today to talk about the Sidney Transit Hub. The Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure has already made a number of improvements along the highway, the most recent being at Mount Newton, and we're talking to them about other improvements that are possible. They're also pursuing some transit improvements in the Uptown area, and we're working with the City of Victoria to improve the transit experience on Douglas Street. So there's a lot of infrastructure pieces going into this puzzle that will be built out over time. Within this area, the transit network changes are guided by our Peninsula local area transit plan. So the map on the right shows the general plan on how routes may evolve over time. Some other items that are currently ongoing is continuing to look at better options to continue to serve the airport and the lands that surround it. We're also looking at how to increase the amount of bus stop space available in Sydney, as is the end of so many bus routes, and we want to be able to continue to increase service. And part of that is developing this transit hub that we'll be talking about. There are a number of town plans that support this initiative. I won't read over these all in detail, but from the official community plan, the climate action plan, the active transportation plan, there's a desire to create a multimodal transportation hub in Sydney, as well as to integrate rapid transit. I've mentioned the word transit hub a few times, so I'll try to explain that a little bit. So the way we see it is it becomes this very distinct and clearly identifiable area we can go catch the bus that may look and feel a bit different than your typical bus stop. So it'll allow people to easily transfer between bus routes as well as between different modes of transportation. Of course, we work around the province, so the design of these hubs may look different depending on where we work on them. So it's really important for us to integrate it into the community. So you can think another way to kind of describe it is there's an opportunity. There's kind of a bus exchange to transfer between bus routes. There could be bike parking facilities. There could be a car share provided by Modo, and there could be a park and ride. For the Sidney Transit Hub in particular, it's quite an urban location. It's not an area where we want to encourage the vehicle park and ride, so that's not included in our plans. I just wanted to take a quick moment to acknowledge Bill 47, which is the province's transit-oriented areas legislation. So they identified a list of bus exchanges around the province where municipalities need to provide a certain level of density. Not all, it's more to note that not all exchanges were identified. They generally tended to be the larger and busier exchanges with higher frequency bus routes. So there are a number of exchanges in our region which were not identified. Ultimately, it would be up to the province to decide when and how to add new exchanges to their list. So now we're going to get a bit more into the Sidney Transit Hub in specific. I'm sure you're all familiar with this area, but just to identify on a map where the existing Route 70 stops on both directions and 5th Street. So that is the route that would evolve into a rapid bus route, the Route 70. I've also identified Parking Lot E, which is a town-owned parking lot, which will come up again later. Within the Peninsula Local Area Transit Plan, 2 different options for where the rapid bus could stop were developed. So there's the option to keep the bus on the highway, or there was an option to bring the rapid bus route onto 7th Street. So that being kind of this quicker loop off of the highway than what's currently onto 5th Street. When we looked at those 2 options, they both had merit. Ultimately, we saw more benefits out of the 7th Street location, as well as it being substantially easier to implement. Creating bus stops on the highway near Beacon Avenue could be a very substantial project and could delay its implementation by quite some time. You may ask, why don't we just keep the rapid bus keep on coming to 5th Street where the Route 70 currently stops? There's a few reasons for that. One, we really want transit to be a fast and efficient mode of transportation, and it is quite slow coming all the way to 5th Street. Also, if we were to continue to increase the amount of buses that are coming onto 5th Street, we would need more space to accommodate more buses stopping at once. So that would likely mean taking away on-street parking spaces from 5th Street, which are sometimes in quite high demand and more serving the smaller shops. And then there's also a growing number of residents and people working on the west side of the highway. So being able to move that primary stop a couple blocks to the west would make it a bit more centralized. Again, this is just a map to gain some perspective around the area that we're going to be talking about. And we've also noted the existing public parking areas in pink that we may mention upon. As part of our study, we identified 3 different options that we would consider. The off-street option is our recommended option, so I'll spend a little bit more time explaining it. Essentially, the flagship part of it is that we're proposing to reallocate space out of that parking lot E to make the primary component of the transit hub. So the rapid bus routes, both in the northbound and southbound direction, would stop in there, as well as a number of other stops. This creates quite a lot more public space around the area. So there's a lot of space for a large transit shelter, improved landscaping, bike parking, additional benches, things like that. This option provides a lot more opportunity for that. There are still a few other bus stops on Bevan to accommodate all the different routes that we want to be able to provide for Sidney. Another key aspect of it is that we would be proposing to change the configuration of the Bevan and 7th intersection. So we would be removing a couple of left turns that vehicles are currently allowed to do. There are other ways for people to drive through the area and still reach where they needed to go. Why we're doing that is to primarily make the intersection quite a bit safer. And as you can see, some of those crosswalks are quite short, where people might only need to cross 1 or 2 lanes of traffic at a time. As you'll see in the next examples, it's quite a different environment. So this is what we're calling on-street option 1. And as you can see, those orange buses are quite a bit more spread out through the area, so it'd be quite a bit harder for people to transfer between routes. And there's also very limited additional new sidewalk or landscaping space. And you can also look at that, kind of the size of that larger intersection at Bevan and 7th again. On-street option 2 is essentially just kind of like a lower cost version of option 1. It does move some of the bus stops further away. So it provides some cost savings. It does impact a few more parking stalls. Again, with this one as well as the last one, you might fit some of maybe your standard bus shelter might kind of just have enough space. Doesn't really produce that kind of destination type feel that we would desire, and those space for those additional amenities, whatever we kind of end up working with the town of Sidney to decide on what those are. So as I mentioned, the off-street option is our recommended concept to move forward, as it provides a lot more of those multimodal benefits and better kind of integration with the community. It does come with a higher capital cost, but it is within a reasonable amount that BC Transit typically pays for these types of projects. So in summary, the off-street option provides the best passenger experience. All the bus stops are closer together, easier for people to transfer, and more space for people. It provides the greatest amount of space for additional landscaping and public realm improvements, and it also provides the safest street design and pedestrian crossings. It retains about 12 of the parking spots in the existing parking lot E, including the electric car charging stalls from BC Hydro and the accessible parking. It does remove about 30 parking stalls from the area. Within this area, in particular parking lot E, in the town's previous parking study, they were some of the lesser used areas out of the downtown core. So again, touching upon our next steps, we are here today seeking your approval in principle, generally seeking that this is a good location for a transit hub, and you support us continuing along the path of more design work and more public engagement. If we get that today, our next step will be going to the Victoria Regional Transit Commission to get a formal level of support, as well as their support to continue to develop a business case for this project. It's important to note that as part of this project, the funding partners would be BC Transit and the Transit Commission. We're not asking for the town of Sidney for a financial contribution at this time. If there were any instances where the town was asking for things that were above and beyond what we would normally provide, one example from a different community was they were wanting some underground infrastructure upgraded, sewer pipes and such. That wouldn't typically be our responsibility. But most of the general things that one would expect to see at a transit facility, we would provide. So our next steps after that we'd be continuing to revise the design with staff from the town providing input, as well as doing public engagement and getting their feedback as well. With that in hand, we'd be able to develop our usual process of getting a business case approved from BC Transit and seeking federal funding if it's available, and then eventually getting to detailed design and construction. With that in mind, I thank you for your time. We're available to answer your questions now. We'll also stick around for the staff report, which is the next agenda, if you have more questions for us afterwards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Button and Ms. Mossy. I'll turn to my colleagues if there's questions. Councillor Garnett, Novik, and Rintoul, and I'll get to all of you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Mossy and Mr. Button, for your presentations, and for Mr. Wadsworth for being present if necessary. Appreciate it. I'm just going to do a slight comparison to the McTavish roundabout because it's one of our highest crash areas in the community. So if you could go back to slide 22, I would love to see how you envision regular traffic and bus traffic flowing through that particular area, just from my perspective. Like if people are going to be confused by it, or if it's going to be pretty simple for them to follow.
Yes, I've definitely heard a lot of questions or complaints about the McTavish roundabouts. I think for this area, in my opinion, as a street designer, it simplifies the intersection and it removes some turns that some people can make, and it doesn't just do that by putting up like a no left turn sign, but actually puts a concrete barrier in the way. So it should be very clear to people which turns they can and cannot make.
But in terms of actual how the vehicles would function through there, like I'm trying to figure out. It's hard from my size picture to try and gauge how the bus is entering, where it's leaving, and the layover buses, which I'm assuming they're going to continue straight down Bevan and go up 5th. Would that be there, or would they go down? Like that's what I'm trying to figure out, which way the traffic's going to flow with them.
Yeah. So if within here. So for example, with this one, for any cars coming from the direction of the highway, they would be forced when they come to this area, I guess they could turn right into the Mary Winspear Center, or they would be forced to go straight to continue going past the transit hub towards 5th. For vehicles coming from the north on 7th, they would be able to do all the movements they're currently available to do. So they can go straight into Mary Winspear or turn left. For vehicles coming from the east, they would be forced to turn right onto 7th. So right now, vehicles would currently be able to turn left into Mary Winspear. With this design, they would not be able to make that left turn, but they would be able to make that left turn a bit further south into the Mary Winspear south driveway. In terms of buses, the rapid bus route would come from the highway, kind of at the top left of your screen. And then it would make a left turn into the larger transit area where it would pick passengers up and then get back onto 7th Street just above. There are a number of other different bus routes that we could be operating through here. We haven't necessarily defined them all at this time. That would probably be the next step, but we've designed it so that we can accommodate buses coming from every direction.
Okay, yeah, that was kind of my next question. I was wondering what routes would be going through there. And I'm just thinking like a double-decker making that turn back to go back north up 7th, and how that would impact the lane that appears between Coast Capital and the liquor store. Vehicles going through there, if they might need to add a stop sign at the end of that or something in terms of a safety perspective, because vehicles, like it or not, tend to go through there a little quickly, and if a bus is pulling out, it's just trying to look at it from a safety perspective. But yeah, I thanks for that, because I was trying to grasp in my head, when you look down at the bottom there, it's not really clear that that's where the buses turn in. It's kind of like it's a gray area, so to speak. So that does provide some context, which is good to know. And sorry if I may, Chair. And you mentioned Highway 17 and it being closer for the employees and residents of that area, and having it closer than 5th Street. And this is where I was wondering about what's going to transit through there, because we're in a situation, and you mentioned the active transportation plan, that people are not comfortable crossing the highway. They consider it to be unsafe. So even with it being there, you're still wondering whether employees and residents are going to want to cross there, which leads to another discussion for us in terms of advocating for the pedestrian overpass with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. But that's a concern I have, is if there's no other bus from there to get them to where they're going on a time that works for them, or even just from that perspective, then would they use it? Like that to me is like, because they don't want to cross it on foot, like walking across the highway. So you said those are specific details that would come out potentially later, but these are just things that I've been mulling over when I was looking at your actual overall proposal here. And my one last question is, with regards to this particular option, how would this option impact the 9 boulevard trees that exist around that sort of 7th Bevan, and then the 3 on the opposite side of the street where the layover is proposed to go for those 2 buses?
Through the chair, this option would likely need the removal of at least some of those trees. I can't say for certain at this stage which would be able to be kept. How this option does compare with some of the others is that it generates the most new landscaping area. So there could be new trees and other landscaping planted in its place.
Yeah, thanks. It's just, every time I bring up the urban forest strategy, that one of the things it says are threats and vulnerabilities for our tree canopy is the loss of, or the lack of, larger sized trees in our downtown. And these aren't large by standards, but they're not small either. Most of them are all pretty well established. So from an overall health perspective of our community, the goal that's here is it aligns with climate action, but at the same time it kind of steps back when you take the trees out of the equation, because whatever you plant there is going to take a long time to reach that potential that they already provide. So but I appreciate what you've had to offer, and I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Novak, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Mr. Button, Ms. Mossy, thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. My first question is, this rapid bus, I assume it goes all the way to Swartz Bay, and then into Victoria. Will there be a stop at the airport? Can you go directly to the airport from Sydney, for example?
Yeah. Through the chair, this rapid bus route does go, as you mentioned, from Swartz Bay to downtown Victoria, and the closest stop to the airport would be on Highway 17 at McTavish. There would still be other bus routes that could be taken either from Sydney, from this location, or from the McTavish Exchange that would go to the airport. That is a topic that we are continuing to look at how to best serve the airport.
Okay, that's a big problem for Sydneyites, is getting to the airport quickly, especially early in the morning for those 6 and 6:30 and 7 o'clock flights where you have to be at the airport 2 hours before. That's always been a problem. Second question, the rapid bus service, how much time will a traveler save over the fastest existing route? I think it's the 70 that's the express right now. So how much time will the rapid bus save over the existing express route, 70?
Yeah, through the chair, a lot of the potential infrastructure changes that are being considered aren't fully defined right now, so we don't know exactly how much of a time savings there would be. If you look at, if I were to think about the corridor in general, we could potentially be looking at saving perhaps in the range of about 10% or so, 10 or 15%. If you look at one of our other rapid bus routes, the 95 that goes from downtown Victoria out to Langford, the investments in the bus lanes so far have saved about 20 minutes of travel time during the peak period. So certainly for that route, it becomes much faster to take the bus than it would be to drive a car, certainly at the busier periods of the day.
Okay, so 10%, the current trip time is about between 45 minutes and an hour. So you'd say maybe 5 minutes to 7 minutes on the overall trip? Is that fair?
Through the chair, at this stage, I would say somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 minutes would be a reasonable assumption at this far, and we would know more later on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. The slide that's up, this number 22, I don't think I heard you comment on if I were exiting the Mary Winspear Centre in this traffic configuration. So it would appear from the roundabout near the top of the diagram, the overhead, that my only avenue to exit the Mary Winspear Centre now would be to turn right. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, through that exit, the only option would be from right to the right. Through the exit further to the south, you would still have both the right and left exits. That's certainly something that, you know, through design we could work through the Mary Winspear Centre, and if we can support them through providing new signage or anything like that, we would be happy to do to encourage that behavior.
Yeah, I'm curious, and it'd be a question for staff later with respect to encouraging traffic to that more southerly exit, which is also used by emergency services, both BC Ambulance and Sydney Fire, to exit from that community safety facility, whether or not we want to encourage additional use of that access and egress. So I'll leave that to question to staff later. This intersection, particularly the traffic turning right here, so coming up Bevan and turning right, currently gets very congested. And so perhaps somewhat in the theme of Councillor Garnett, I was keen to hear about the flow of traffic. So a bus exiting this location is going to have to cross over that first lane of traffic to get to the second lane of traffic to turn left, which is a challenge for me and my vehicle if I'm exiting that area currently. So it is a relatively congested area. So I have a little bit of concern with this. This off-street option hasn't negated the need for these bus stalls along the side of Bevan. Explain to me why that is. Like, there's still 3 of them indicated here.
Through the chair. So in addition to the rapid bus route, there are a number of other routes that serve Sidney. And with Sidney being the terminus of a lot of routes, essentially where a lot of bus routes start and end, we needed a bit more space. So that's when the transit operators get a chance for a break to use the washroom and for the bus to get back on schedule. Also within this area, there could be buses coming from a number of different directions. So it's not like, for example, the McTavish an exchange that's a loop where it can accommodate buses coming from all directions. This is more kind of an on-street style. We want to be able to make sure that this design can accommodate a variety of different transit routes that could go through Sidney. So that's why we're wanting some bus stops just strategically placed in different locations. This does also reflect the amount of bus stops we anticipate needing over, I would say, perhaps the 15 to 20 year time frame. So this accommodates not just your current service level, but expanded levels of transit service.
Thank you. Could you move to slide 19? With respect to Highway 17 and the McTavish Park and Ride facility now, was BC Transit a funding partner in the pedestrian overpass at that location?
Through the chair, I believe that was a Ministry of Transportation project. I wasn't around at the time, but I do not believe BC Transit provided funding for that.
So you would have provided the funding for the bus. I'm thinking, I guess, on the east side of the highway in particular, then you would have provided the funding for that turnout there, the stop in that location, but not the access to that particular bus stop. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, all the improvements were funded by the Ministry of Transportation.
Okay, thank you. What give me an appreciation for the capital cost on Highway 17 then, because noting, my comment around congestion at 7th Street, what attributes the capital cost to be so much higher at Highway 17 for the bus stops as illustrated on slide 18 and where they would be located? Because those are basically, I take it, near the on and off ramps currently to the highway.
Yeah, through the chair. I believe in order to establish bus stops, especially close to Beacon Avenue, the highway would need to be widened, which could be quite expensive. There would likely need to be a active transportation overpass. Overpasses these days, I believe, cost at least 10 million or more. So I think between those two, it could be a quite costly project. Still, from a transit perspective, we would still encourage a lot of those elements. Having a pedestrian overpass would be good for transit, even if we pursue with the proposed location. However, it's not waiting on those improvements in order to improve transit.
So your assessment of the capital cost being significantly higher in there includes the need for a pedestrian overpass at that location?
Yes.
Okay. Our strategic plan has identified the need to address, safe passage from the highway, whether that's pedestrian overpass or what that looks like, I guess remains to be seen. So I think what I'm saying is that needs to be addressed for the town, probably in a timeline, somewhat similar ultimately to this undertaking. And so I wonder, with that in mind, does that perhaps provide the opportunity to give reconsideration to the Highway 17 location?
Through the chair, I believe at this time we're still happy with this location. We're still working with the Ministry of Transportation to try to identify opportunities to improve transit and active transportation along the highway, and we're working with both Sidney staff and other municipalities to improve that.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I guess I'll start with following up on Councillor Novak asked you about the time of travel. You said it saves about 10 to 15%, but with the rapid bus, like the 95, they also added, you know, like it goes by every 15 minutes or something. 3 of them will go by while I'm waiting for the 72 downtown. It's the only time I'm jealous of people going to Langford. But, so I'm guessing that there would still be some savings in the amount of time because it would be coming more frequently than the 70 or the 72 currently come. Is that part of it as well, or is that 10 to 15%, you know, like point to point, you know, how do you calculate that?
Yeah, through the chair, when I was speaking about time savings, that would be literally the time that it takes the bus to go from one end to the other.
Okay.
Obviously, yes, it would also be a lot of savings to the passengers when buses come more frequently, because they may not need to wait as long, or they may not need to plan as much about which exact bus time they're going to get on the bus.
So with rapid bus, is it always kind of like we aim for one to go by every 15 minutes, or do you have like a different calculus for each route?
Yeah, through the chair, there are general frequencies that we like to strive for rapid bus. I should note that the Peninsula route is a bit different from the other routes due to its length, and the land use along the peninsula is quite a bit different than what we see, for example, on the route going out to Langford or on Mackenzie to UVic. So right now, you know, some of the buses are either like the Route 70 or the Route 7 Express might come once every hour or so. So it would, it'll take time for sure to increase the service levels on that route.
Okay.
And for us, I guess one thing that we looked at when we're making the bus go faster, that's both good for passengers, it makes the trip more attractive, but it also makes it easier for us to invest in that increased service because the cost of operating that route then becomes lower.
Okay, thank you. And this is something when you know, people were talking about what to do to induce ridership onto buses, and I actually calculated it out and brought it to some Victoria and Saanich councillors who are not persuaded that making it free was not the better idea, but that it cost me $50 to take the bus because of the extra time my kids had to be in childcare because of the extra time it took me, where it only cost me $7 to take my car. And so until that time can be reduced, until I didn't need the childcare, there was no way to induce me out of my car to go to the meeting downtown. And that's going to be a problem for employees all the time. And so that change, and then, you know, per Councillor Garnett's comments about, you know, the west side and people getting across there, that the last mile ridership, I feel, is going to be a huge issue up here as well, that if we can't get people from this transfer station to the place they need to go, then again, the time isn't going to work out for them. And of course, your ridership doesn't go up, so you can't build further facilities. So I'm just wondering, I feel like there's going to be a lot of dominoes that will have to be tweaked in order to get people going there. The airport, Councillor Novak mentioned already, I found it faster to walk than wait for the bus from the airport. And so again, making sure that those transfer times will line up, big issue. So I guess the other question there was trying to get that last mile going. The diagram doesn't have the bike storage on there, but you've kind of got it on the picture that would typically be something. Is there kind of an idea for the option, the preferred option to have the bike storage facility there?
Through the chair, that would be a detail that we would get into later. Certainly that would be a type of facility that we would like to provide. And that's something when we were looking through the three options that we developed with the option, there's certainly a lot more opportunities to place that, because there's a lot more public space available.
Okay. And I guess you have the Modo thing. Is that something that you are in discussions with Modo, or probably Evo also in Victoria? Well, maybe not Evo because they don't have spots, but Modo for sure, about how that changes whether or not they actually put a car that's near that stop. The nearest one is 3rd Street. And so I don't know if that is just kind of like, because we are a moto, that's kind of included as part of a transfer station preferability, or if there's something that you actually work with moto to get a car stop near there.
Yeah, through the chair. Yes, likely in the next stage of design, we'd likely reach out to them and see if they would be interested in having one of the parking spaces. Of course, all those parking spaces would be under the management of the town, so that would be if the town was supportive of the idea as well. With Moto, these days they typically want the ability to have an electric car, including the charging infrastructure. So that's again one of the things that if they were to request that there be a charging unit for their car, that's something that we can incorporate into the design.
Okay, last one from me. I don't know what the slide number was. It's page 11. Maybe this is probably the same slide number. There are a couple of park and rides. I know the one in McTavish currently exists, but there's one that's kind of on the airport lands there. Is that the one that's currently kind of used also as an employee parking lot on the west side, or are these proposed park and rides, the one on Wayne and the one on the airport? Or, yeah?
Through the chair, the map that's here is desired attributes of the transit system in the future. When I'm looking at that map, I could see challenges developing that park and ride, and we're not taking any action at this time to make it happen.
Okay. Because I was like, there is an employee lot, but I knew it
Yeah.
was locked overnight. It would be
Yeah.
very, very difficult. Okay. And yeah, and Wayne Road as well. All right, thank you. That's last of my questions for now.
All right, Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Further to my colleagues' questions about service capacity, typically the 70 Express is tied to the arrival and departure of the Tsawwassen Swartz Bay Ferry. Do we see an increase in that service? Because as an example, today I was on Resthaven when the number 72 came through full. And it means that nobody in town can take a bus from pretty much Parkland School into town until possibly somebody gets off downtown, in downtown. So is there going to be more service there so that we're picking up more people from the ferry and thus providing local service to residents?
Through the chair, yes, that is the desire to increase the service level on the 70 as part of this kind of this gradual and evolving rapid bus launch.
Okay. The question concerning bikes, we noted the bike storage there. Will there be increased capacity on the buses to take bikes in transit?
Through the chair, right now, the buses have space for 2 bike racks in the front. There are some challenges with providing a 3 bike rack on the front of buses, both in terms of the impact on the bus operations, as well as like their visibility at night with the bus lights being right behind the bikes. So that's not something that we're currently pursuing.
Any consideration to looking at inside transit of bikes, which some other communities offer? So you take the bike inside, so the bikes, the bus is designed for bikes inside the bus.
Through the chair, that's not something that we're currently considering. We do allow people, if people have a push scooter or an e-scooter, that they're welcome to fold it up and bring it on the bike on the bus. Okay.
This rapid transit hub, will it now become the transit point for the 71 or the 72, 85, 81? They'll all transit there versus at 5th and Beacon.
Through the chair, if we were to go to public engagement, that's something that we would seek their feedback on. It would likely be desired to continue to have as many bus routes as possible going through there, so that people can connect. There certainly would still be bus stops on 5th Street. We know the ones at Beacon are very popular.
Yeah, just further to Ms. Mosey's point of the next trip, so this would be critical information for people. Like right now, you can sometimes make the 72 to 70 transfer, but not always. So if we're increasing the service there, this will be a critical factor in making people, as my colleagues have suggested, get on the bus. Last question is just an easy one, I hope. Ms. Mosey indicated that transfer to digital mediums for tickets. For For those people that don't have digital processes, which we have an aging population here, don't necessarily have smartphones, what will be the option, or how long will the paper ticket system last for them?
Through the chair, so we are currently phasing out the paper tickets, and as I mentioned, we do expect that for most people, UMO through either the UMO mobility app or the reloadable smart card, eventually payment via credit card or debit card will be a choice for them, and of course cash will remain a option forever. Or as far as we can see into the future. And so I think that those will become the options, and the ticket fare will be replaced by just the single cash fare within the app or the reloadable card.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, and Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you very much for the presentation. First question is with regards to the proposed rapid bus line, what would be the starting point, or is it defined what the starting point would be in Victoria?
Through the chair, by starting point, you mean the starting point of the bus route itself?
Yeah, is it Royal Oak? Is it the Parliament Buildings?
It would
Somewhere
be
in between?
It would be at the legislature.
At the legislature.
Yeah.
Second question, could we go to slide, or sorry, just to clarify, just with regards to some of the comments with regards to desire for increased service to the airport, the intention of the rapid bus line up the Pat Bay Highway is not intended to provide new service or faster service to the airport itself.
Through the chair, not directly. People could continue to use this route to transfer to other routes to get to the airport. If it is running more frequently and faster, that would make that route faster, but it's not going to go directly to the airport.
If I may, I'll just add that exploring airport service, be it improved service to the airport or direct service to the airport, is something that the Victoria Regional Transit Commission has asked us to, as staff, to look into. So it is something that we will be looking at and presenting them with information for their consideration for the 25-26 fiscal year.
Great, thank you. And is it indicated yet whether the current McTavish interchange would be part of the rapid bus line? Considered part of the rapid bus service?
Through the chair, yes, it would.
Okay, thank you. Could you go to slide 8, please? Just in terms of the timelines, we're looking ahead. When is the next Victoria Regional Transit Commission meeting?
Through the chair, the next meeting of the Victoria Regional Transit Commission tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Okay.
And so this, the results from this evening will go to the September 10th meeting of the Victoria Regional Transit Commission.
Thank you. On the slide with regards to design and business case development and approvals, I appreciate development business case, and I think it was mentioned approval from the business case approval from BC Transit. Would that be also approved by the Transit Commission? Or need to be approved by the Transit Commission?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay. And so you would need approval, you would need that design, 50% design, and Class B cost estimates and approvals from BC Transit and the Commission prior to seeking a provincial funding?
Through the chair, yes, that would be the standard process.
And so it's indicated, so we understand it going to the Commission in the fall, and then in the next two boxes, the green and the orange, we see 12 to 18 months for each. It was very positive that the West Shore Rapid Transit line initiated some 12 to 14 months ahead of the longer timeline that was of the range that was given. Are there things that could make this faster than 36 months from the time of the Commission looking to approve in the fall, or closer to the 24 months?
Through the chair, for this one, I think that the community engagement will be quite important. We are working very close to some private properties, and it's very impactful. So I would be hesitant to try to rush that stage. So I think through that process, as well as developing all the necessary approvals, it's always something that we can try to do things efficiently and quicker. But I would be hesitant to promise anything at this stage.
Thank you. And if we could go to slide 22, please. And so this is a question perhaps more directed to staff, and that is with regards to the 2 bus stops just below the Mary Winspear main entrance. Are those stops all within town right of way, or does that start to encroach on the MPS lands?
Through the chair, they're presently all within the town's right of way. In some areas, it does get quite close.
Okay, thank you. And so in terms of a bus coming off the highway, coming down the Bevan connector, so it would be turning left into the transit hub?
Yes, it would come off the highway and then turn left in the transit hub area. It would stop at the further north orange bus.
Okay. Yeah. It would stop there before turning into...
It would, all passengers would board where the most northern orange bus is located.
Okay. Sorry, in the transit hub itself, or
Yes.
on Bevan?
In the transit hub.
Okay, I guess I'm questioning what the rationale for those bus pullouts on Bevan.
Through the chair,
But if the bus is turning into coming off the highway
Yeah.
is turning into the hub.
Yeah, through the chair. I forget the exact number, but there's about half a dozen other bus routes that go through this area, with a number of them terminating. So those other bus stops would be for the other routes that are going in the different directions.
Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may just add as well, I know West Sydney and the airport have both come up a couple times tonight, and having that additional layover space does allow us to continue to add capacity and add more service. So when we look at providing those connections across the highway and also more service to the airport, all of those things will support the transit system and your service here in Sydney overall.
No, thank you, and that's positive. I mean, the point raised about crossing the highway, I mean, if there is a good connection to the West Sydney North Saanich Business Park, then that would certainly help facilitate that. Those are my questions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Even after all that, I still have a couple things. I'm wondering I'm still unclear about whether there will be increased service over and above what the 70 now provides. Because I got the impression that, yeah, we're aiming towards that, but then in a response to, I think it was Councillor Duncan, I got the feeling that not yet, or, so if you could comment on, confirm.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So rapid bus service would mean an increase in both service frequency as well as these improved amenities and infrastructure projects. So it's both. It would come with an increase in service frequency. And I will also mention that there's 4 current priorities of the Victoria Regional Transit Commission for when expansion resources are available. And one of them is increases to the rapid bus network. So that's increased service level on these rapid bus routes. So eventually that will be the Peninsula Rapid Bus Line. And another is Peninsula and airport service. So those are all going to support one another when expansion resources are available, meaning that there's support for expansion from both the Victoria Regional Transit Commission and the province, which both have to support. But looking ahead, it certainly looks like we'll continue to receive support for expansion.
Okay, so so increased frequency for 70 or the fast bus, and you talked about in the presentation about acknowledging the extra growth and the jobs on the west side there. And so would a part of this, gathering from your comments just now, increasing the frequency for a route or routes going that direction as well?
Through the chair, that would, through you, that would be a separate conversation in seeking expansion resources for those routes, but that's certainly something that we could look at alongside the commission, and perhaps something that would also be looked at through public engagement, but that would be left with our planning team.
Okay. Did you give any consideration to having a stop close to McDonald Park Road where the co-op is on that side, and on the other side, kind of where the Chamber of Commerce is? You know, that area of the town for Sidney and North Saanich is seeing quite a lot of development, and it seems a good thing to tap into if you want to get people on the bus.
Yeah. To the chair, certainly that is something, a location where we were looking at. That location would be on a Ministry of Transportation right-of-way, so we'd be working with them to establish a stop in that location. Certainly with the pedestrian overpass already there, that provides a good starting point to getting bus service there.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
So is that a yes, or?
It's unfortunately it's too early to tell right now.
Okay.
There are at least a dozen different locations along Highway 17 where we would be interested in making improvements with the ministry.
Okay.
So it really depends on their priorities and their funding ability.
Okay, great. Would it be washrooms at the hub for the public as well, or just drivers?
To the chair, that would be a topic that we'd be happy to discuss further with staff. BC Transit presently doesn't operate or maintain any public washrooms, so we'd have to discuss further how that partnership would work.
Okay, great. Thank you. And that's good for me. I'll look to colleagues if there's any other questions. It appears not, so thank you very much for your presentation and taking our questions. All right, colleagues, we'll move along to number 8. So the staff report on this, the BC Transit, Sidney Transit Hub. And I'll look to staff for an introduction on that.
Good evening. I don't have much to add. I think that was a very complete conversation, but staff are supportive of the off-street transit hub option for Sidney. And I'm here if you have any additional questions. I guess I can speak up about Councillor Rintoul's question related to emergency services on the laneway and that goes through the Mary Windsor parking lot. We have looked at preemptive devices in the past, both in front of that laneway where it enters Bevan and also at the traffic light at Beacon and 7th. So we could investigate that further if that is an issue. So we will stay on top of it and make sure it doesn't impede emergency services.
All right. Councillor Rintoul, anything else?
Thank you, Chair. If you could just elaborate further on preemptive devices.
Sure. So we actually looked into adding one at Beacon and 7th when we redid our signal last year. It was out of scope originally though, so we didn't have sufficient budget to actually put it in place at that time, but we can easily add one to that stoplight. There's currently one at Beacon and 5th, and really all it does is when there's an emergency vehicle coming, it will turn so that it's green so that emergency vehicles can go through that location. And we could add some sort of preemptive lighting to make it where if emergency vehicles are leaving the community safety building, it would alert people who might be in that laneway to get out of the way so that emergency vehicles can pass through that area.
If I may,
Yes.
Chair, thank you. In terms of congestion at the Mary Windsor Center itself, if we're diverting traffic to that more southerly exit from the Mary Windsor Center, I don't know, currently whether or not it's proven to be a challenge for BC Ambulance Service or for Sydney Fire, but if we're encouraging more traffic into that lane, is there a similar mechanism to alert traffic from the parking lot from entering that drive aisle, perhaps at time of an emergency and vehicles trying to leave? I'm just curious about the level of congestion that exit is going to receive now that the other exit is being limited.
So to be clear, the people can still exit to the right from the roundabout location. It's just the straight through direction that's being blocked by this, or maybe blocked by this change. But fire trucks are very good at taking the opposite lane if they need to, or ambulances, so they will work around the vehicles, and we can work with BC Transit during the detailed design for this project as well, and work with our fire department. This has already been reviewed by our fire department, but we'll continue to work with them in the detailed design.
Thank you.
Councillor Duck?
Yes, further, thank you, Chair. Further to the question from Councillor Rantoul, is there any consideration to eliminating right-hand turns out of Mary Winspear at that roundabout section as you can go out and turn right further down? Just seems that we're creating a turn that can be alleviated.
Through to Councillor Duck, we would have to look at egress requirements for the Mary Winspear Centre. I wouldn't want to just shut down that traffic circle if it's still available for a right in, right out. But we could definitely explore that as we get into the design.
Thank you. And further to that, the crosswalk that comes off the pedestrian walkway parallel to the Dairy Queen and crosses there, would that be moved to the other side of that exit from the Mary Winspear Centre, which would provide quicker access for people coming on and off the buses that are in the layover area and going into the Rapid Transit area versus crossing traffic coming out of the Mary Winspear and then crossing Bevan and on the walkway?
That is not part of the scope at this time. We don't have any plan. That's an older style pedestrian rapid flasher, so we don't have any plans to move it at this time, but we can definitely speak with BC Transit about that during the design as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. So we don't have a park and ride planned, for BC Transit, but I could foresee the Mary Winspear employee lot becoming a bit of a park and ride, especially if it does manage to work out that we get the transfers to the airport better. Is there something, because part of that now, is just general public parking. Would there be something that we would look at doing to discourage park and ride, or would we encourage some limited park and ride? Like, what will we do with that if that becomes something people start wanting to do?
Through to Councillor Duncan, we can work with Robbins on enforcement of that lot if we are finding people are staying there for longer than 24 hours, which isn't permitted now. So if we are finding people are parking there and then going to the airport or something, we could take that approach. But we'll also monitor it and see if the use just gets way higher, and maybe we might need to implement some alternative to ensure that it's still used by employees in Sydney. Maybe some sort of parking pass for that area for employees in Sydney. But if this does happen, we will definitely monitor it and adjust as needed. That parking lot is approximately 50% used at this time, and Lot E as well is less than 50% used during peak hours, so there is room to expand. But if it does become an issue, we will implement an alternate parking enforcement strategy.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Garnett?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. And probably Mr. Newcomb best to answer this, but maybe Mr. Humble can as well. Bill 47 was touched on, and I realize this plan's a few years out to being actually operational, but does staff have a view on whether these increased service levels, I guess it'd be only hypothetical, how the provincial government might look at that in terms of a transit-oriented area if the service levels were to approach what they've been using as guidance on other places in the CRD where this has taken place?
Sure. Through to Councillor Garnett, I'll take a stab at answering it, and perhaps Ms. Mossy has more additional information. But my understanding is the province has designated these locations, and BC Transit doesn't really have any control over how they designate them. And as far as the frequency, it won't be at a frequency that would meet the thresholds at this time. But I'm not sure if Ms. Mossy has anything to add to that.
I'll just add that we're also looking for some clarity from the province on the process for either removing or adding transit exchanges to this transit-oriented area defined list. And so that's something that we're still working with the province to learn about.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, Councillor Novick?
Thank you, Chair. I have some concerns because I'm not seeing a huge increase in service levels.
So is there a question or just expressing concerns?
Well,
We're at questions for now.
okay. I had a question, but I lost it. I'll let it go.
Okay. Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I'm prepared to move the recommendation if there's no further questions, or we
Okay,
can
any
have
other-
questions while the motion's on the floor.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I will move the recommendation that the proposed off-street Sidney Transit Hub option at Bevan Avenue and 7th Street be approved in principle.
Second.
And, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank the presenters again, and just indicate that whether it's at our local council tables, other council tables throughout the region, at the CRD, Transportation Committee, or the CRD, the rapid bus initiatives are a very high priority for municipalities. It sounds very positive on the implementation of the service in the West Shore, and we know that the Peninsula line, along with the Mackenzie line, is in the planning stage and advancing. So it's very exciting to see us get to this stage, and this is important for our community because of the transit hub. And I can appreciate, I think all of us, are through that Bevan area, Bevan and 7th area, and it can be a congested area, certainly during what we call rush hour times or different times of the day. However, let's remember that our overall strategy throughout the region is mode shift. And these are the initiatives that need to come forward, need to be advanced for us to see a mode shift to transit. And I think the presentation and the answers to our questions indicating that this would be an increase in service. I mean, the route will be faster in itself to some degree, but it will be increased frequency. And the lines that connect to it, whether it's to the airport or to West Sydney or throughout Sydney itself, hopefully as mode shift continues to progress, you would see service improve through that. So it's always a chicken and the egg situation, but I think this is very positive, and I fully support this. I think in terms of some of the congestion that might happen in terms of different access egress through the other part of the Mary Winspear lot, I think working with both the experience BC Transit, the experience of our staff and our fire department, we can certainly work around, find options at that location. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And the seconder, Councillor Duff?
Yeah, I support this as the most viable option that is available to us, and I think as the mayor's pointed out, this will offer a good core transit opportunity. Certainly we have to address airport access and west side access, but I think our colleagues here from BC Transit are already looking at that and starting to look at ways to bring people across the highway, if not a pedestrian overpass in the future, which is ours to address. But I think this is the most likely location for that transit outside of a business, a busy downtown core. This will take some of the pressure off that, I think, too. Certainly, concerns have been expressed around pedestrian and vehicle safety here, but it's a function of change, and I think we can work through this, as the mayor's indicated. Thank you.
Councillor Winchell?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll acknowledge when I first reviewed this, I was quite keen on what's recommended here, and I think on paper it looks great. Being being very familiar with the intersection in the area, in practice, I'm a little concerned about the level of congestion this may add to an already congested space. So, I wish we'd seen the sort of same detailed options around the stops at Highway 17 to give us a little more food for thought. The Highway 17, options for the town, I think, are a better option for a rapid bus, certainly for access to West Sydney, where a number of people are working, would provide less congestion in the town itself. I feel like it helps the town make a better case and argument for an improved pedestrian crossing, whatever that looks like, at that location, if the rapid bus station were to be located on Highway 17 as opposed to at 7th Street. So I'm a little concerned right now about the 7th Street option, but I'll certainly continue to listen to my colleagues. Thank you.
Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Chair. And I have some of the similar concerns that Councillor Rintoul has expressed. And as I mentioned earlier, I do have concerns around the loss of the trees. I don't think we can undervalue the importance that they have in our community, even though we're talking about shifting people out of their cars. Until all buses are electric, they're still on fossil fuels. So those trees actually mitigate what they're providing in our community. So that does concern me. And as much as we want to say that change happens and people have to react to it, knowing this intersection well and knowing this community well, I can see this causing issues for some people, some drivers for sure. I think it'll take some getting used to. But as I look at it, and you described it well, but to the average driver in our community, I could see this being a little confusing. So I do have concerns around that, but I would assume that through the refinement, things can be dealt with that might come up and through engagement and other people might bring forward. But yeah, overall, I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to wait and hear, as Councillor Rintoul said, some other comments. Hopefully, other people will weigh in, but I do have some reservations for sure. I'll leave that right there for now. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. I was really happy to see this come forward, as much as we kind of busted your chops for like an hour about this, but because when we've been looking at transit hubs in Sydney for a long time and where we could possibly do it, it's always been kind of hoping for maybe we'd had this idea of a development over on the west side and that was going to enable this to happen, but it was dependent on a development. And many people have brought up, being able to kind of induce, sweeten the pot or induce Modi to want to help us put in a pedestrian overpass if we had that there. But I don't think Modi would work that way. I feel, it's putting the cart before the horse when it comes to what we've experienced with being able to set priorities with the province in that department. So I like this because it takes the control back into our hands as a region and as a town and gives us something we can make a decision about and action on without having to wait for a senior level of government that has, when it comes to that pedestrian overpass and changes to that intersection or any of the intersections in this area, not being very responsive to us to date. And this is a bird in the hand when we know the other birds just they may never come. I hope that some of the conversations that are going, especially with that one at the Chamber of Commerce site, if that would be a game-changing stop, by the other pedestrian overpass that's currently there. That would be wonderful, and that would really use the existing infrastructure we have and would have the least amount of negotiation, hopefully, that would have to be done with MOTI, or maybe North Saanich has a little piece in there they can put in. But having this stop, I think, rather than trying to hold out or hoping for one that involves that senior government, is something that I can definitely get behind, simply because it does put the control in our hands. Whether it's an optimal position, that's nothing we can do about, but this is a thing that can get done, so I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Other first-time speakers, I think, Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some reservations, like Councillor Garnett. I'm concerned that at this phase of the project, we're only saving 10% of the time, 10 to 15% of the transit time from Sydney to downtown. If we could get that bus route, it was really a rapid bus route, so that from Sydney to Belleville or downtown would be in the order of half an hour or 35 minutes, then I think I'd be all for it. But I'm not seeing the advantages at this point. Perhaps they will come. If there was to be a fix to the airport problem, I'd be a lot more supportive of it, getting to the airport. If there is a fix to the frequency of this, then well, it hasn't really been discussed at this point how this frequency is going to compare to existing frequencies. I'm concerned about traffic congestion in that triangle around Mary Winspear when there's multiple events at Mary Winspear and buses coming in like that. I don't think the roads there were designed for that kind of traffic, and I'm not sure we can retrofit the area to accommodate that kind of traffic easily. So while I'm all for moving this forward in some way, I'm not sure that what we're seeing is the solution to our long-term transit problems. So I'm not quite sure where to go on this. I'm prepared to take it to the next level to see if we can perhaps fine-tune this. But I would like to see something that's going to really create a benefit for Sydney, and so far I haven't really seen it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all first-time speakers, so I'll throw in my comments. I also have reservations with this, the congestion issue again. I believe that intersection at Beacon and 7th is the #1 spot, the highest spot for traffic accidents, I believe, in Sydney, or it's right up there. So I worry about that extra congestion, not just from the buses, but if people start using it, the Mary Winspear lot as a park and ride, or it'll be a drop-off location for people. So there's going to be more traffic. So that's a concern for me. So I don't think it's a great location. The other concern, like some of my colleagues, I don't see a significant increase in getting us downtown. You know, coming off the highway, and yeah, it's a little bit, maybe we save a few minutes by not going down to 5th and coming back out again. But yeah, it's still having to turn left and come into that area that's congested and go out again. If the bus stop was right on the highway, kind of like a setup they have at Mount Newton, to me that would make more of a difference. You don't have to come into Sydney, and it's the bus stop is right there. The other thing is, in terms of access to the west side, to the industry there, the new apartment that's going up, the extra residential development, it's a long walk from Bevan and 7th to go over the highway, and we've talked about the safety issues as well. But if people can get off right on the highway, and they still have to cross the highway, but it's a quicker walk. So at this point, I would be more interested in exploring the option. I know it's more expensive to explore an option that's on the highway. I know comments have been made about, well, we should take this one, a bird in the hand sort of thing. But I'm more interested in the long-term picture and what's going to work, rather than taking something that is kind of like better than nothing, or maybe we could make it work. So I think that's where I land on it at this point. Thank you. I'll look to second-time speakers. Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I just, something that I don't know came out directly in the presentation, but in listening to colleagues in the presentation now, we're really gaining two things with this transit hub. We know a transit hub is a requirement for for a Peninsula rapid bus line. The second is we need a new transit hub in Sydney. Right now, where buses are stopping and the exchanges is in different places, and it's not efficient. We actually had to separate the one on Sydney Avenue at 5th into two different bus stops along that line just because of congestion right there. So, you know, BC Transit has the experience of modeling these transit hubs, not only in Victoria. They've got 57 routes in Victoria, but throughout the province. They're in different cities in the province. And so let's think about, we're gaining two things. We're gaining a transit hub that we need for the existing routes and services that we have, but we need a transit hub for a rapid bus, and this location suits both of those. I don't see the highway location serving as a transit hub for the different routes that come and go through Sydney. Yes, it may be the most efficient for might be the best for rapid transit, but that's why I bring up the point that we're looking at two things for Sydney. We're looking at the transit hub for existing routes and the rapid bus line. I'll leave my comments there, Chair.
Councillor Rentoul and then Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I don't want to see this proposal, what's been brought forward, dismissed. I recognize this is committee of the whole, and so this is going to be a recommendation to council. And I think what I would really like is, on reflection, is to see this, you know, move forward to council. Hopefully, an opportunity at that meeting for some members of the public or perhaps some nearby stakeholders to come in and provide some of their thoughts to this as well. And so I think I'm leaning to moving this forward to council to see that this discussion continue in that form. I'm not suggesting that I've instantly become comfortable with this. I haven't, but I think the dialogue, I don't want to see the dialogue stop here tonight, because essentially that's at risk if it doesn't move forward to council. So I'll leave my thoughts there, Chair.
All right. Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Chair, and just to my colleagues, we are only approving this in principle at the Committee of the Whole, and this will come back to Council. But as the Mayor's pointed out, this has a combination of things. Putting a rapid transit stop on the highway is not going to create linkages to the 4 other lines that come through Sydney. You've got the 85, 81, 72, and there's one other one I can't remember, but this is going to make that linkage much more possible, and that won't be possible at the highway because those routes just don't go there. You know, Mount Newton was mentioned, but that has one line connecting with it going across Mount Newton at that point. This would be 4 lines connecting into the rapid bus. And the other part is that it is, I'm going to guess that staff have already looked at the traffic flow through here, because that will be an important ingredient to the safety of both vehicles and pedestrians in this area. And so I think they've probably got some good ideas, and as Councillor Tools maybe suggested, that we may hear those at council next week to give some sense of how that might be delivered at this location. The congestion is bad at 7th, is bad at 5th. Buses load up at both locations, so and traffic gets lined up behind them at both locations. So I don't think that's neither here nor there relative to congestion. We'll experience that in both areas, but as has been indicated, this is to try and take that load off that vehicular traffic and get them on buses. Thank you.
Any other second time? I'll comment. I think Councillor Rentoul has made a good point about at least moving it forward to our council meeting. A question to staff or maybe to transit. The mention was made of getting feedback from others. You know, I'd be interested here from Mary Winspear Center, the business community. What's our plan for getting their input on this?
I will refer this one to Ms. Mossy or Mr. Button, if that's okay.
To the chair, right now the process that we were planning on following was that after we receive support from the town and from the Transit Commission, that we could have more broader public engagement. So we would invite members of the public to provide feedback, as well as you mentioned, such as the Mary Winspear Center. There are some stakeholders that are very close to this project, so we'd want to have more like direct one-on-one conversations with them. When we work with communities around the province, we like to work how the community works. So we'd be working quite closely with the town staff to understand the key stakeholders in this community and how they expect to be engaged with.
Okay, and I guess what I'm wondering is, when you go through that engagement, is the engagement focused on, here's what council has already decided, and, you know, your input on the design? Or is there an opportunity for that? Does that feedback come back to council and say, well, based on the feedback, maybe we want to do something different? Or are we, if we approve this in principle, are we kind of locked and loaded that this is the way we're gonna go?
To the chair, I believe that council could provide us with that direction if it's something that you are looking for another chance to weigh in on after there has been public engagement, then we welcome that direction.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, colleagues? All right, I'll call the question on the motion. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you. And that concludes our business for this committee of the whole. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. All right, Councillor Duck and Councillor Garnett, thank you. We are adjourned.
We'll reconvene in 5 minutes.